Hey everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. Coming to you from my front porch today back in Colorado. Still some stuff going on, so not quite settled in. Some more plumbing stuff dealing with. So let me know if everything's working okay. If you're hearing the music, great, and if not, yeah, maybe not a big deal. But this is my session. We talk about some aspect of using MuseScore. And what I'm going to be talking about today is things having to do with the general subject of navigation. Okay, so I'm talking about getting around in your scores, getting from one place to another, moving between scores, how you're looking at it, the different views that are possible. I don't know, things that are really kind of basic things that you're going to want to know if you're just getting started with MuseScore. And even if you've been using it for a while, my guess is there's going to be something I show you here that you'll be like, wow, I didn't even know about that. So let's take a look and see what we get here. So, first of all, I just finished playing my cafe score, and thanks as always for checking in and letting me know where you're coming from. It's always good to see who's here. So, I just finished playing the score, and therefore the score is now showing me the last measure. Let's say I want to get back to the beginning. That's like the most basic thing that we're going to want to do, right? Is kind of move around the score. Let me show you the thing that a lot of people do, and most people figure out you can do this, and then I'm going to advise you almost never do it. You can click an empty spot on the page and then start dragging it, and move your way along and eventually get it. And it's like our plumber has successfully completed the job. So great. You can drag to move the canvas around, but you have to be really careful to drag an empty spot in the score, and you can only drag like a little bit at a time. Depends on how much room you got on your mouse pad or your touch pad or whatever. So first thing I want to show you here is the home key, right? Many keyboards have a physical home key. If your keyboard doesn't have a physical home key, like mine doesn't, there's usually a keyboard shortcut that's built into your computer that works across all applications. And it's usually, there's a key that's usually labeled FN. I'm on a Chromebook, and this is what used to be called the search key. Now it's called the everything key. And I press that plus the left arrow. When I press that, it acts like home. So home. Yes, someone tell Peter to refresh, because apparently, yes, refresh. Okay, so home gets you to the beginning of the score, end gets you to the end. So FN right goes to the end. So home, end. Those are two of the first things that you might want to know about if you're doing things in MuseScore, home and end. Now, if you have a keyboard that has physical home and end keys, probably it also has physical page up and page down keys. They move kind of a screen full at a time. So they work very much like they would in any other program, really. And if you don't have physical page up and page down keys, it's usually FN plus up, FN plus down. So a whole lot of the navigation that I do is just that, FN plus my cursor keys. That's often, I get a lot of mileage just out of those. But let's talk about a few other things. You may have noticed that as I did the page down, let's look at this area over here. This area over here on the right-hand edge of the screen, when you're not hovering your mouse over it, it's just clean. But if you hover your mouse over there, a scroll bar appears. So you can actually scroll with a scroll bar if that's something you like to do. And the same with horizontal scroll bars. You can scroll horizontally by hovering your mouse down towards the bottom of the screen, and then that scroll bar appears. So there are physical scroll bars. Those are actually new with MuseScore 4, so previous versions didn't have it. Almost everything else I'm going to show you is the same between MuseScore 3 and 4. But I mentioned I get a lot of mileage out of the page up, page down, home and end keys. The other thing I get a lot of mileage out of is my scroll wheel. This is one of the things that I shouldn't say I'm ashamed, but I'll just use that word even though I don't really mean it. I'm ashamed to say, embarrassed to say, whatever. Surprised to say that I used MuseScore for probably a year before I discovered that touchpads have scroll wheels. So I remember having a physical mouse that had a scroll wheel, and then you could flick the scroll wheel and that would scroll. But uh, I haven't had a physical mouse because I'm mostly using laptops. I haven't used a physical mouse for 20 years probably. So for a long time, I didn't realize that touchpads had scroll gestures, but they almost always do. It's two-finger swipe, two-finger swipe. So two-finger swipe is doing scroll up and scroll down. And you can also, on many touchpads, scroll horizontally using two-finger swipe, going left and right. But not all touchpads support horizontal scrolling this way. So instead, if yours doesn't, use Shift while scrolling vertically. And so Shift plus this action, vertical two-finger swipe, does the job. And yes, Dave, so on Apples as well as any keyboard, because it's not just Apple computers, any computer that lacks physical home keys, FN left, FN right, FN up, FN down are going to be your go-tos. So the scroll wheel is extremely useful. Now, notice that right now when I'm scrolling, you'll see that my score is scrolling vertically, right? Each page of the score is laid out one above the other. That's actually not the default in MuseScore. So if you're looking at this and wondering, well, gee, mine doesn't work that way, that's because I set an option that you might want to know about. I sometimes like this vertical scrolling, and sometimes I like horizontal scrolling. And it depends on what I'm doing and what kind of score I'm dealing with. But if I go to Edit, Preferences, Canvas, you'll see there's an option here to switch between horizontal and vertical scrolling. So I'm going to switch to horizontal scrolling. That's what is the default. And now you'll see that horizontal scrolling is a little more sensible for this particular score, because then when it runs off the end of one page, it runs right into the beginning of the next. So and yes, so this is the default view that you would normally be in. And so in this view, I can scroll horizontally, and I'm just using two-finger swipe horizontally. If I zoom in, and those zoom in, everything that I'm talking about here in terms of two-finger swipe and all, this works on every single program. This isn't like some unique MuseScore thing. Home and page up, page down, two-finger swipe for scroll wheel, or scroll wheel if you have a physical mouse. These are all things built into your computer, whether you're on Mac or Windows or Linux or Chromebook. It's pretty much the same across all programs. So is this next thing. Control, while scrolling up and down, zooms in and zooms out. So if I zoom in, now I can scroll vertically, and you'll see that it's doing that. And Dave is absolutely right. Everything that I'm doing is only about changing what is showing on the screen. It's not actually changing what you have selected. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I just have to think about whether there's anything else I need to talk about in terms of this basic stuff. But that's a great point, Dave. So, and I'm about to answer your question about moving the cursor. So in MuseScore, when I'm scrolling here, the MuseScore's sense of what is selected doesn't change, and what is selected determines where playback will start. So if I press space right now, right, it starts at the beginning. Let me turn my volume back up. Okay, so if I press space right now, it continues where it left off. If I just press home to go back to the beginning, that doesn't actually change where that playback is. If I press space, it's still going to continue where I left off. If you want to actually change what is selected in your score so that you can start working on it, either to edit your score or to playback, we're going to use Control Home. Control Home, or Command Home, I assume, on a Mac. Control Home will actually select the first element in your score. You might be able to tell in this case it's actually selected the bar line on the first staff of the first measure, the left bar line. It doesn't select the title frame just because it doesn't. It selects, I think it's because in a continuous view that wouldn't make sense. And I'll show you continuous view in a little bit. So Control Home selects the first element of your score. Control End selects the last element of your score, which is the bar line at the end of the last measure, bottom staff of the score. So Control Home, Control End. And Richard's asking if I entered this using the piano keyboard or computer keyboard. I use the computer keyboard virtually for everything. I very rarely use, in fact, I virtually never use the piano keyboard. I'll demonstrate how to use it. It's kind of fun to play with, but it is nowhere near as efficient as typing. I will occasionally use my mouse to click in a note if I'm trying to build a chord from the top down. You know, I talked about in my newsletter the shortcuts to add intervals below notes. And yeah, I can use those, but sometimes if I just want to add a note below a note, like if I want to add a note right here, if I want to add a C below that G, I will use my mouse to do it occasionally. So anyhow, that's that. So I'm zooming back out now, Control Scroll. So now we've seen a little bit about selecting things. So Control Home, Control End, select the beginning or the end of your score and scroll there also. There's a lot of other commands now that, while I'm on the talking about the keyboard things, we've already seen that page up and page down go a screen full at a time. So let's look at what it does now that I'm zoomed in a little bit. If I go a screen full at a time and say page down, notice what it did. It kept me on the same measure, but kind of moved me to the bottom of that page. If I use page down again, it moves me to the right-hand side of that page, right? It's trying to basically scroll all around the page to show me everything. Here's the top of page 2, there's the middle of page 2, there's the bottom of page 2, there's a little more of page 2, right? So page up, page down is kind of panning throughout your score a little bit at a time. That's often useful. But if you really want to go literally a page, like a physical page, printed page of your score, Control page down will move you. So if I scroll up to the top of this, you'll see I'm on page 3. And if I now press Control page down, now I'm on page 4. It's a little easier to tell if I zoom out a little bit more. So Control page down moves me to page 5, page 6, page 7, etc. And playing from the end doesn't make sense? Well, no, but going to the end for other reasons certainly could. Maybe you want to go to the end because you want to add some new measures and start working on them, or you just want to finish editing the end of your piece, or any number of reasons why you might want to go to the end. So that's why the shortcut is there. And again, none of this is even remotely different between Windows or Mac or Linux or Chrome OS. It's identical on all operating systems. The only difference is whether your physical keyboard happens to have a home key or whether you need to fake the home key with FN left. But that's not a Mac versus Windows thing, because a lot of Windows computers don't have physical home keys either, but it's still the same idea. Home is FN left, whether you're on a Mac or Windows or Linux. In fact, even on computers that do have physical home keys, FN left will usually also engage home. All right, so we've seen that Control page up and page down moves me a page at a time. So now that we're talking about selecting things in the score, I want to talk more about navigation by selection, because MuseScore doesn't have a sense of a cursor exactly. When you're in node input mode, if I press N right now to go to node input mode, you'll see that now I do have an actual cursor. This is showing me where new notes are about to be entered. So that is an actual cursor while you're in node input mode, which I got to by pressing N. Then there's an actual cursor. This tells me where the next note will be entered. But if I leave node input mode by pressing escape, there's no cursor. What there is the selected element. And the selected element acts like a cursor. So like right now, the selected element, it's hard to maybe tell depending on your screen, but it's blue. This selected element is blue. And if I press the right arrow, it now selects the next note or rest, right? The right arrow is moving one note at a time. And then if I press the left arrow, it moves me backwards through the score, right? So left and right arrow will move you one note or rest at a time through the score. And then you can also move up and down through the score using Alt up and Alt down, which I assume on a Mac is Option. That's the only difference between Macs and other keyboards, is if I say Control, substitute Command, and if I say Alt, substitute Option. But everything else will be the same. So if I press Alt down, it will move me down to either the next staff or the next note below, whatever is the next thing below. Alt down will do that. On my particular keyboard, on my Chromebook, Alt down has special meaning on Chromebooks, and so it's not available for MuseScore to use. So I defined my own substitute for Alt down, which you may have noticed is the left square bracket, and then right square bracket moves up. So that moved me up to here, left bracket moves me down here, left bracket moves me down there, etc. To define your own shortcuts, I show this almost every week because it's a useful thing to know, is Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts. And then I can just type the word down and it will show me all the shortcuts that involve the word down, either because the down arrow key is part of the shortcut or because the name of the command has the word down in it. I think that one is actually called, what is that command actually? It's this one, Select Note Rest Below, which somehow managed to show up even when I searched for down, because I guess it's smart enough. I think there's another contact, because the default shortcut was Alt down, I think it still showed up in the search. So that was convenient. Select Note Rest Below, which will either be on the same staff or on the next staff, and it will do it either way. So that Alt down, Alt up move you up and down through the score. And you might be wondering, well, why not just plain up and plain down? Well, that's because if I have a note selected, left and right can move me through the score, but up and down actually change the pitch, right? It's changing the pitch of that note. And I don't want to do that. Now, in hindsight, I will tell you that if I had been designing this, I don't think I would have done that. I don't think I would have used left and right to navigate up and down to change pitch, but I'm pretty sure we inherited that from Sibelius. And when I say inherited, I don't mean that MuseScore is actually like based on Sibelius, like we actually took code from Sibelius or anything like that. I just mean when Werner Schwer, who was the originator of MuseScore, when he was first designing it, he borrowed a lot of ideas from Sibelius because it was the notation program he was the most familiar with. So he made a lot of commands work the way they did in Sibelius. And I think that is one that we kind of stole from Sibelius. I'm going to just flip over. I just want to make sure that everything is still hunky-dory here. Whenever I don't see chats for a little while, I have to make sure that I haven't accidentally hung up or something. Okay, so Alt up, Alt down, navigate. You might be wondering, well, what do Alt left and right do? Well, they do something extremely useful, and if this was implemented specifically for the benefit of blind users, but it's great for anyone to know about. Alt left and Alt right will move you through the score, not just a note or rest at a time, but an element at a time. So for instance, right now, if you can see, I've got the rest here, this half rest at the beginning of the score selected. Alt right now selects that tempo marking. Alt right again, select the swing marking. Alt right again selects the rest. Alt right again selects that note. Alt right again selects that dynamic marking. Alt right again selects the crescendo. Alt right again selects the slur. And then the next note, and then the next note. And then it moves through the notes. So Alt right and Alt left allow you to select things by keyboard that are not notes or rests. And you can select almost everything in your score by keyboard using Alt left and Alt right. And again, it's hugely useful for blind users who aren't going to be using the mouse, because if you can't see to click on an element, you won't be able to select it by clicking on it. But Alt left and Alt right will always move you around. There's only a few elements that you won't be able to select that way, and one of them, for instance, is the accidental. There's no way to just select that natural sign in front of the G here using Alt left and Alt right alone. It's going to move between the notes, but luckily you don't necessarily need to select that accidental, because there's not a whole lot you can do with it anyhow. If you want to remove that accidental, you can just give the accidental command, which is equals, and that will remove the accidental. Press it again, adds the accidental. So even though you can't select the accidental, you can still manipulate the things. If you want to change it to a flat, press minus. That's the shortcut for flat. And there's a small handful of other things that you can't get to using Alt left and Alt right, and almost all of them are kind of like accidentals, where even though you can't select them, you can still issue the commands that work with those elements, and so you end up being okay. So Alt left, Alt right move you around that way. And so that's great for just moving through your score kind of one element at a time. Another useful shortcut to know about, and this is another one that's sort of, so Alt left, Alt right, that's sort of MuseScore specific, as is Alt up and Alt down, because the things that those commands do don't really make sense, say, in a word processor. But this next one does make sense in a word processor. Control left, Control right, or on Mac, Command left, Command right. If you think about what those do in a word processor or any text editor, it moves you a word at a time, right? Well, in MuseScore, it moves a measure at a time. So right now, I've got this G flat selected. Alt right selects the first note of the next measure. Alt right again selects the rest in the next measure. Alt right again selects the first note of the next measure. Alt right again selects the rest. That's the first note of the next measure, and so forth. Alt right will select the first element of the next measure. I'm Control right. Did I say Alt? Sorry, Control. Control right, and then similarly Control left moves backwards the same way. So those are the navigation commands. Now there's a handful of other navigation commands that, frankly, I almost never use. If I go back to Edit Preferences, Shortcuts, and if I type down here, you'll see there is, let's see, maybe it's not down, but there's commands that will like move to, or maybe next is a better thing. Next. So there's go to next frame. So there is a shortcut you can define, a command to say go to the next frame. It'll just select the next frame in your score. There's not a shortcut for it by default, but you can define one if you want. Also, go to next staff or voice. So if you think about what Alt up and down do, let me just show you this for a second. Within the piano part here, if I select that top B flat here and then use Alt down, it goes to the G and then to the D and then finally to the next staff. So it will move through every note of the chord. But there was that other command you saw, go to next staff or voice, that will skip all the notes of the current chord and move directly to the next staff or voice. So that's what that does. And Dave, I'm not sure what you mean about odd effects if you add a natural sign, but I will say when you add a natural sign that way, it acts like a courtesy accidental. It's like, for instance, do I have any courtesy accidentals in this piece? I might. I don't know if I do. But if I did, I'd be able to show you. I may or may not. Okay, so this F right here doesn't need to be there, right? This F doesn't need to be there as far as the key signature is concerned. It's there as a courtesy because the previous measure had an F sharp. So the equal sign will force the accidental there whether it needs to be there or not, whereas the up and down keys that change pitch will never add that natural for you. So how do you make a default in the next commands? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a default, but to define your own shortcut, you're going to go to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and let's find that one where I said next. So go to next staff or voice. There's also a go to next system. I like go to next frame is kind of interesting. I'm gonna define a shortcut for this right now. Go to next frame. I select that, and then I click the define button. And now I'm going to type a shortcut that I want to use. And I don't even know what's available. Dave, you were asking about a table of what's available. There is no such thing. There is a table of what's used. If you go to the MuseScore handbook or within my course, there's a table of shortcuts. So there's a table of what's used. The problem is different keyboards have different layouts and different things might be available. Like you might have a physical home key, you might not. You might have a numeric keypad, you might not. You might have a symbol for the British pound on your keyboard, or you might not, and so forth. So it's hard to say what's available. Let me try, okay, control there. I've entered a shortcut for next frame, and I will save it and press OK. Michael, I'm talking about navigation, talking about just sort of getting around in your score, like home to get to the beginning and end to get to the end, and control or command left and right to move a measure at a time. I'll also be showing some other, stuff like continuous view and things like that. So just generally getting around, navigation. All right, so I've defined a next frame command. All right, well, let's go ahead, and do I have the other score open? No, I don't. I'm going to open another score now. So I'm going to go to the Home tab here. This is, if I've opened scores recently, I do like to go over to the Home tab and just click it here, and I'm going to go to this Prelude and Fugue. So this Prelude and Fugue from Well-Tempered Clavier, we were just talking about in office hours yesterday because it has some really interesting stuff going on in it harmonically. And let's say, like I'm on the Prelude now, and I want to get to the Fugue. Well, the Fugue has a frame in it. So in principle, if it works, I haven't actually tried this command before. Like I said, I never use it. But if it works, Control, Alt, Shift, right bracket will just take me to the next frame. All right, did it take me to that first frame? Now let's try it again. Nope. All right, so that command appears to not actually function. I've never used that command. It's possible that, let's see. Yeah, it says go to next frame, so apparently it didn't do it. Now the question is, did it do it and just not move it? Nope, it didn't do it at all. So that command doesn't work. There you go. I didn't even know that command existed, but unfortunately it doesn't work. So let's talk about other ways, though, of moving around as far as getting a sense of your score. I'm going to show you something that is another thing that I rarely use, but is certainly useful. It's a certainly useful tool, especially in larger scores. And Michael, almost everything that I talk about here works the same in MuseScore 3 and 4. There's only a couple of things that are different. What was the one thing that I mentioned already? Oh, scroll bars, right? MuseScore 3 does not have these scroll bars that appear on the sides of the window when you hover over them. Oh, that's only in MuseScore 4. There might be one or two other minor differences, but almost everything else is the same. So, let's say that I want to find that fugue, and I don't feel like just scrolling until I see, oh, there's the fugue. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the timeline. I'm going to go to View, and then Timeline. This shows me kind of an overview. Oh, yes, and Dave, there are definitely plenty of differences between MuseScore 3 and 4 in terms of where different commands are located and so forth, but specifically I'm talking about navigation. The navigation system, all the stuff that I'm talking about today is identical. But as far as keyboard shortcuts, tie is different. All the accidental shortcuts don't even exist in MuseScore 3, and the shortcut to open special characters is different. There's like a very small handful of shortcuts that differ, but none of them are the navigation shortcuts. And none of the other navigation commands are different either. So anyhow, the timeline shows you this kind of overview of the score, and you can see, hey, look, there's a 4-4 marking here at the beginning, but there's another 4-4 marking here. Okay, it's technically a common time marking, but it shows up as 4-4 in the timeline. So this gives you an overview of where the time signature changes are. Also, if there have been key signature changes, it would have showed me those, because the well-timed clavier, you might know, is a prelude and fugue in all keys. There's not a key signature change. There's not even a time signature change, but it does display a new time signature here, because that's what you do at the start of a new movement. And then also you can see the double bar. I can click the double bar here and it will show me the double bar at the end of the prelude. So you can get kind of an overview, and there's the double bar at the end of the fugue, right? If there had been tempo changes, they would have showed up in here. There's all sorts of things that show up, as well as kind of an overview of your score in terms of this isn't very applicable to this score, but if your score has multiple instruments, it'll show you which instruments are playing in which measures, and that's really useful. Like, you want to know, man, where's that place where the horns come in after they've been resting for like a whole lot of time? You can use the timeline to then find the place where the horns aren't playing and then click to it. So I'll show you that in a minute. In fact, I am just going to go ahead and open another score. I'm going to open my this orchestral score that I use as a demo sometimes, Dusk, because it's one where the timeline could be useful. Now, I don't use the timeline very much. I feel if I was looking at a lot of scores that I wasn't familiar with, I might find it more useful. Like if I was opening other people's orchestral scores and needing to find my way around, I might use it. But I know my own scores well enough that I don't find it all that useful. But in any case, let me go ahead and open the timeline here just so we can see it as applied to this score. Let's say I'm looking for the spot where the horns come in after a long rest. So here's a place where if I click right there, you can see that's the flute entrance after a long rest. The light gray is rest, the darker gray is where they're playing, right? If I'm specifically looking for horns, and I've got some font issue going on where the labels aren't fitting in here, but ignore that. Here is then where the horns come in, right here, right? Right, and then I know there's a place in the score where it's basically, oh, here's all the brass are playing here. It's the first place in the score, all the brass are playing. I bet that's something that's kind of climactic, right? You can also see the rehearsal marks here, and that's often useful. And you can also see the tempo changes. This is where the tempo changes from moderato to allegro and so forth. So there's all sorts of useful things if you're dealing with large scores, especially large scores that you're not intimately familiar with. Then it'll give you that kind of overview. Now, I mentioned that I'm often familiar with enough that I don't need that, and that's because let me close my timeline. I don't want to focus too much on the timeline here. When I'm scrolling through here, I recognize what's going on musically. I know where I'm at. I know my own piece. I know I'm getting close to where the brass choir section is. Oh, there's the brass choir section. I just scrolled right past it. Brass choir is right here. And so I can tell by what I'm looking at musically as I'm scrolling. So that's, I will just scroll and look. But also, if you know the rehearsal letter, like if you know something in particular happens at rehearsal letter F, well, Control F or Command F doesn't go to rehearsal letter F. It's find. Control or Command F opens a find box here. And now you can type a letter. I'll type letter F, and it takes me to rehearsal letter F, right? So that's letter F. And if I then type H, it will take me to letter H and so forth, right? So it's very useful to go by rehearsal letter, or if you know a measure number, you can type the measure number. If I want to go to measure 83, I type 83 into my search box, and it will take me directly to measure 83. Are there not 83 measures in here? Is that why it's not doing it? I thought the piece was that long, but let's say measure 8. Maybe I have to hit enter. Huh. It appears that the measure number search did not work. That's quite disconcerting because it always has worked. Huh. All right. It selected it, but it didn't move the view there. Did I turn off? I want to find out if I turned off the pan score button. Nope, I didn't turn off pan score. So somehow something caused that to not jump the view there. So it went to measure 83, but it didn't jump the view there. So now I'll just try hitting the right arrow to select the next note, and now it's moved the view there. So I don't know what happened there, but whatever. That's how to fix it. So Control F will allow you to jump to a particular rehearsal letter or measure number. And then, yeah, those are some of the things that I use all the time. I do use Control F quite a bit. Like I said, I don't use the timeline much. There's also a thing called the navigator. If I go to the View menu and open the navigator, it opens a picture of my score that shows all the pages of it. So now I can jump to page 12, jump to page 19, right? And there's page 9, and somehow I think it's something having to do with how I've resized my window that's causing a little glitch here. But in any case, the navigator is designed to let you navigate. And so there's page 5 and so forth. So the navigator is another way of moving around. To me, it's not that useful because it's showing the score too small to be very useful. The timeline tells me more useful information. All this does is show me thumbnails and page numbers. But if I want to go to page 15, to go to page 15, Control F for find, and then I type P15, and it will take me to page 15. So page 15 is P15 to get to page 15. All right, let's close my navigator again. And navigator over here. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is continuous view and page view. So this is a score for orchestra, and notice, so you can read it left to right. There's the first page, then there's the second page. I'm 2-finger scrolling here, third page, fourth page, etc. And it does kind of read straight across, but you've got these breaks between the pages, and who needs that, right? So I mean, it's great when you're trying to fine-tune the layout and all, but when you're just entering notes, you don't really need to have these breaks. You might just want to see one long continuous strip. So that control is in the bottom right-hand corner of the window, page view, and we're going to switch to continuous view horizontal. That's going to display the score in one long continuous strip. And Dave, you were asking about what happens about, changing in the middle of playback. And I'm going to tell you right now, I would be afraid to try that. I'm going to try it anyhow because I'm curious, but I will not be the least bit surprised if it just crashes. I doubt anyone really thought too hard about what would happen if someone tried to change the view in the middle of playback. So I'm going to start my playback, and I'm going to switch from continuous view to page view and see if it does anything. Hey, it worked. Wow, that's kind of cool. That is neat. And yes, you can define shortcuts for changing between views also if you like. So yeah, that totally is an option to change between continuous and page view. There's another view that doesn't make any sense for orchestra scores like this, but it's continuous view vertical. And instead of one long horizontal page, it's one long vertical page. But it's sort of nonsensical for an orchestra score because now you got to read left to right, and then at the end you have to find the next system here, and it doesn't really stand out as, oh, this is the next system, right? It's hard to tell where one system ends and the next one begins. So I would never think about using this mode for orchestra scores. However, For piano scores, it's actually not so bad. So here's my prelude and fugue. Let's switch this guy. Let's turn off my timeline. View, timeline, turn that off. And I'm going to go to continuous view vertical. Well, this is actually kind of nice. It's just one, it shows me everything scrolling down. And then I don't have to scroll down and then over to the next page and then over to the next page, right? So this is kind of a nice view. It's related to that thing I showed earlier about scrolling the pages vertically. But here there's no actual page break. It's just system after system, which is fine. This is not a bad view for looking at piano music or things like it. So I use this view occasionally. I use it when looking at my own worksheets, when I'm doing like my theory worksheets and so forth. So I use it for that. Okay, so I've got at this point 3 different scores open, and I've been flipping between them. Now, this has been a major point of contention, I know, when MuseScore 4 came out. MuseScore 3 forced all your scores into the same window, which is occasionally useful, no doubt, but it meant that all your scores had to use the same sounds. If you loaded a sound font for one score, it affected all your scores. And if all you have to use is sound fonts, people put up with it. But it was not going to be at all feasible once we have VSTs and Muse sounds to have all your scores that are open forced to use the same sounds. So MuseScore 4 now puts each score in a separate window, which is much better as far as that goes. And it's fine on Windows and Linux and Chrome OS, but Mac does not handle that very well. And we're still looking for solutions, ways of getting it to work better on Mac. But it's a pain on Mac. But here's what it should look like. I've got 3 scores open. If I look at my taskbar, I have one MuseScore icon. When I click that one icon, I see each of the 3 scores listed. That's how it should look. That's what we wish Mac would do. But unfortunately, Mac doesn't support multiple instances, which is what these are called. It knows how to support multiple windows if they're sharing the same instance, but that would force them to share the same sounds, and so it wouldn't solve the problem. So unfortunately, on Mac, you get a whole clutter of icons, right? Of multiple icons displaying. You might look at this and say, hey, I've got two icons there, but that one's MuseScore 3. This one's MuseScore 4. So MuseScore 4 is only showing up once, and when I click it, I can see the names of all my scores. Similarly, if I press Alt-Tab to show me my open windows, and what is that, Option tab or Control tab on Mac? I forget the thing, but it's, again, not a MuseScore thing, but an operating system thing. You can see each score with its name. There's the prelude, there's Dusk, there's there's the live stream itself, and here's the MuseScore Café theme music, currently on the home tab, but I switch over to score. So that's how you can move between scores. I use Alt-Tab all the time, so I can get back to my prelude, or get back to Dusk, or get back to the live stream, and so forth. So yeah, if you're on a Mac, it is kind of unfortunate. If you're not on Mac, though, this is just objectively better to have them in separate windows, because now Alt-Tab just easily flips between these things. But on Mac, the fact that you don't see the name of the window and you have multiple icons on the taskbar that also don't differentiate, that is a pain in the butt. I would not, I would, yeah, it's just unfortunate. So far, though, no one has found a solution. But the nice thing here is now if I want to copy and paste between scores, it's really simple. So here's my first score. Alt-Tab flips me to my previous score. And so now I can paste into that score. Alt-Tab flips me back to the previous one. Alt-Tab just quickly flips me back and forth between scores. Nothing like that if you've got all your tabs in the same window. You can move from tab to tab with a shortcut, but there's not a shortcut to move you back and forth between tabs like this. So this is actually a pretty huge, great thing, as is the ability to then see your open windows with an actual view of the score before selecting which one you want. So there's a lot of nice things about it, but again, on Mac, it's not pleasant right now. All right, so those are the things that I know that I wanted to make sure I covered. trying to decide, what else is worth talking about here. If you have questions about anything I've been talking about, let me know. There's a couple things that I could also just talk about that are sort of related to this and related to the idea of having multiple windows. This is not like an advantage of multiple windows. It's bad implementation that I hope they fix. But right now, like when I added that shortcut, I think at the time I only had one window open when I added that next frame shortcut. But right now I've got 3 windows open. What if I add a shortcut in one window and then go to another shortcut and another window and define a different shortcut for that same command? Which one will win? I don't know. First one, last one. It's hard to say. So right now, if you want to define shortcuts, I recommend you only have one window open. Ideally, if you customize a shortcut in one window, it would automatically update the other windows. That's what they should do, and there's no technical reason why they couldn't. They just haven't. So seeing multiple scores side by side is in principle an advantage of multiple windows, because then you don't need some silly fancy document side by side feature. You can just display the windows side by side. So I can display this window here and display that window there, and now they're side by side. If I want, I can close the palettes and other things here so I can see the old version while looking at the new. And so it's really nice. Now I have your normal operating systems facility to look at your 2 scores side by side. There's one score, dusk, and there's the other. So that's actually a great advantage of separate windows, is that you really can completely independently look at multiple scores. Now the only downside to this is that right now the MuseScore window can't actually be resized to be really narrow. So if you're on a relatively small monitor like I am, you can only make your window so narrow before it decides I can't get any more narrow. So you end up having to like drag the window partially off screen to get around that. And if you just move the palettes off to the side, that kind of works there. So now I can be working here and I can be working here, and they don't interfere with each other at all. I just had to drag part of the window off screen. Now that's going to be fixable as soon as they come up with a better way of letting these toolbars reflow and allow you to make the window smaller. So to me, that doesn't seem like an inherent disadvantage of Windows. It's just a disadvantage of the fact that currently you can't make the windows as narrow as you might want. So there you go. So yeah, that's the stuff I wanted to show you. I'm still a little wondering about that next frame command not working, and that's a little unfortunate that it doesn't. I just want to see if I tried a different shortcut for it, if that will work. So if I come here and go back to shortcuts, and again say frame, and this time instead of what I did enter, I enter a different shortcut. I'm going to try backtick. Nope, I already used that some. Okay. Shift backtick. All right, shift backtick tilde. I'm just trying to pick shortcuts because it's possible that some like again that particular combination of shortcuts that I tried might be predefined by my operating system. So I'm gonna try tilde. Nope, it's still not working. So I guess that next frame. Ooh, what happened? Next frame command. No, it just doesn't work. Next frame command just doesn't work. Yeah, and if you have 2 screens, that's another possible solution. I will say that MuseScore doesn't support 2 screens as well as it could. I don't know if many of you have tried it, but in principle, you can put MuseScore on 2 screens, and one on one and one on the other. But if those screens are of different sizes and have different resolutions, it'll get confused, and you'll get things like fonts showing up the wrong size and things like that. There's glitches. So MuseScore 4 had a whole bunch of bugs having to do with 2 screens and different sizes. They fixed some of those bugs in MuseScore 4, but then new ones came up. So neither MuseScore 3 nor MuseScore 4 are as useful if you have 2 monitors as one would like, unless the 2 monitors have the same resolution, in which case it should be good. All right. So again, if there's other questions, I'm happy to answer. Here's a couple other things I'll show you relating to the zoom. Like right now, this score, I had been zooming in and zooming out with control scroll wheel. There are commands for zooming. Control 0 for 100%. On my monitor right now, this is exactly the same size as a sheet of paper. That's control 0 or command 0. Control minus just zooms out. Control minus, control minus. Control equals zooms in. At least on my keyboard. On some keyboards, it might be Control plus. On my keyboard, though, plus is directly above equals. And if I try Control Shift equals, nothing happens. So that might depend on where your plus key is. But on mine, anyhow, Control equals zooms in. There is another shortcut that I like a lot, but it's not defined by default. If I... did I change workspaces here? Apparently so. It's like I somehow closed my... Oh, no, I didn't close my status bar. I just dragged it off. If you go to the bottom right and in the zoom settings here and click the little drop down, you'll see there's a setting for page width. I rather like this. It zooms in whatever is necessary to make the page fit the width of the screen. And then if I make my screen less wide, it automatically keeps resuming, right? As I make the window wider or narrower, it keeps this the same width. I like that a lot. I use this a lot. And so I have a shortcut defined for that. Again, I went to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and then typed in Zoom here, and you'll see Zoom to page width. I have it defined to Control \. There's also a zoom to show the full page. I don't find that very useful, but boy, that zoom to page width I use a lot. So Control minus makes things smaller. Control equals makes things bigger. Control \/ will make it exactly the page width. So, and again, that's because I defined that. That is not defined that way by default. All right. So I think I've talked about all the things I want to talk about. Again, I'll stall for a moment here and see if any other questions. Peter, you've got a question. Let me just resize my window so that it looks a little neater. Okay, good enough. Can you zoom incrementally? So that's a good question. Minus is going in steps. Like you see, it's 100. Control minus goes down to 75, and again goes to 50. However, I can just type a number in here. I can type 59, and now it's zoomed to 59%, right? So you can type a specific number, 61. Can I just type in there and then use the up arrow key? Apparently not. That doesn't work like a spin box. That would have been cool if it did. But 2, 3, 4. It's not zooming until I hit enter. As soon as I hit enter, then it actually does the thing. So I don't know. That's a little more control you have there. Peter, how do you modify toolbars? Yeah. And yes, off topic, but I don't mind taking the question. The gear icon here. This gear icon here is where you then can say, hey, I want to have 128th notes. So open the I there, and now I got 128th notes. It doesn't even show an icon for it, just the number 128. If you don't want to see 64th notes, close the I, and now your 64th notes go away. You know, I have a customized version that I created once that doesn't have really any of these buttons because I know keyboard shortcuts for almost everything, and so there's very little that I actually need on my toolbar. So you can customize it that way. You can also grab the little handle here and then undock the toolbar, and you can redock it to the side if you want. You can do all sorts of customizations to the toolbar. I did show that, I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Sometime pretty recent. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Cafe was on customization, and I'm pretty sure I showed that kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to get going here because, I've said what I need to say. I've answered questions. Do I need an Intel Chromebook? Oh, Robert, that is a good question. You need an Intel Chromebook for best results and for support of Muse sounds. You definitely need the Intel because there's only an official app image for Intel. However, if you go to the community, if if I go over to the community site here, and then you click where it says resources, then you will find one of the articles that I posted. If you scroll far enough, or just use the search bar. Just use the search bar here and type Chromebook. MuseScore on Chromebook. Right here is the article. So there's a whole article here on how to download for Chromebook, and there is, it tells you, click the link to watch this thing on YouTube, and then there'll be a link to a special build that someone made. It's not officially supported, but last I tried it worked. Might be out of date, but it's better than nothing. So an ARM Chromebook will work. It's just not the ideal experience. What was the other question that I saw coming in? Oh, for navigating the handbook, the inspector isn't okay. So let me talk about the inspector first. It's not called the inspector anymore. It's called properties panel. This is what used to be called the inspector. So this properties panel, if I select a key signature, it shows just the options relevant for key signatures. If I select a note, it shows just the notes relevant for notes. If I select a range, it shows me things that are relevant for notes, as well as for accidentals, as well as for other things, whatever happens to be in the selection. So an F8 is the shortcut for it. If I press F8, properties panel closes, press F8 again, properties panel reopens. All right. And then the question was also about navigating the handbook. So I'll tell you what I'm going to recommend. Well, first of all, use the search box in the community here. If you are looking for information on something like customize toolbar, that was just a question, right? It doesn't use full sentences, but it searches on keywords. So right here shows a post on customizing the node input post toolbar right there. You can also click the lessons tab here, and you'll see all the shortcuts that talk about customizing the toolbar. And this is actually searching the transcript of the lesson. And so now I want to talk about customizing contents of these toolbars. So this will take you right to the place in the course, right to the very lesson where it is talked about, and right to the very spot in the lesson. And actually, it doesn't go to the right spot. It just goes to the lesson. But it's pretty awesome. But that aside, also, when you're in the course, if you're looking at the main mastering course, let me get to where we're on the view course page. There's also a nice search facility. Oh, it's not on the course page. I'm sorry. It's on the discussion and support page. On the discussion and support page here, I also have a nice search facility specific for the handbook. So customize toolbar. And this shows me, unfortunately, first you get to see some random Google sponsored search results, but then when you skip past those, you'll see the actual handbook pages. So that there, the search facility at the top of the discussion and support space within my course is my recommendation there. So there you go. All right. Now I've talked about a ton of things and answered a ton of questions. So I will again thank everyone for being here. Thanks for all the questions. And yeah, you think that what I picked was going to be a simple topic, but I talked about a lot of things, and my guess is that some of it was new to most of you, because there's a lot of things in there that are good to know about. So next week will be the first Wednesday of the month, so we'll be doing an Ask Me Anything session. So, be ready with some questions. If you got a score you need me to look at to answer your question, you'll be able to post it in the chat, or you can post it in the community. And then tomorrow, Music Masterclass, we'll be looking at borrowed chords. We'll be looking at people's original music that they've created. We'll be looking at some of the reharmonizations they've done and focusing on the topic of borrowed chords. So, hope to see everyone there, and hope to see everyone next week. Have a great week. Goodbye.